Welcome to the Nourish to Thrive podcast, faith-forward, science-backed strategies for women who want more energy, less weight, and real answers. I'm your host, Tanya Pennington-Miller, a functional nutritional therapy practitioner and functional blood chemistry specialist with a master's degree in applied clinical nutrition. If you're tired of feeling dismissed by your doctor, confused by your labs, and stuck in survival mode, you're in the right place. Here, we simplify the science. We get to the root, and we anchor it all in truth, because God made your body to heal and thrive, not just survive. It just needs the right kind of support and less noise. Hello, my friend. Welcome into the Nourish to Thrive podcast. I'm so glad you're back with me today. Now, if you were here with me last week for episode 55, we went really deep on the GLP-1 peptides. And I just really laid out for you my honest and very nuanced position on that class of peptides. And I told you at the end that this week we would be moving into a different class in the peptide world. So that is what we're doing today. And I think that you're going to find this particular subset of peptides very interesting because these ones work with your body's own production rather than overriding it like the GLP ones do. So before we get into that, though, I want you to picture a woman in her mid-40s, and she's not someone who has just let herself go, okay? Like, she has stayed pretty consistent. She works out. She watches what she eats. She has been doing this for years, but somewhere in the last couple of years, she really felt things starting to shift. Her recovery started taking a little bit longer. Like, she would do a workout and just now would need more days to recover than she did before, before she felt normal again. Her sleep stopped feeling restorative, even when she was technically getting enough hours of sleep. And her body composition started changing, even though her habits really hadn't. She was noticing more fat around her midsection, less muscle tone, despite still working out, despite still lifting weights. And this kind of low-grade fatigue that just sits underneath everything else, no matter what she does. And the frustrating part is that her labs keep coming back normal. Her doctor keeps telling her that this is just aging, but she knows something has shifted, and she is right. A big part of what she's experiencing is the natural decline of growth hormone. And today I just want to kind of unpack that a little bit and talk to you about what that means. I want to talk about why it matters specifically for women in this season of life and what this particular category of peptides can do about it. So I think when most people hear growth hormone, they tend to think of one of two directions. Either they think about athletes who are using it to build a lot of muscle really fast, or they think about that, the expensive anti-aging clinics and injections that some celebrity is using to stay young looking, okay? And neither of those pictures is what we're talking about today. Here's what I want you to hold on to for this episode. Your body was designed to produce growth hormone. It does this naturally. It does it primarily during your deep sleep, and it plays a really critical role in how well you recover, how you maintain your lean muscle mass, how you manage your body composition, and how your metabolism runs. And what these peptides do is they support your body in producing more of its own growth hormone, okay? The way it was already designed to. Not introducing something external, not overriding a system, supporting a production process that has naturally slowed due to age and hormonal change, okay? And just kind of asking it to work a little better. That is a fundamentally different conversation than we had last week. So our growth hormone levels naturally decline with age. By the time most of us are in our mid-40s, our growth hormone output is at a fraction of what it was in our 20s. And for some women, this actually starts happening even earlier than that. We might see this happening in our mid to late 30s. And we're going to talk about why this is important, because it's not just about looking younger or, building muscle for aesthetics. growth hormone plays a role in cellular repair and recovery, in how efficiently you do or don't burn fat as fuel, in how well you build and maintain lean muscle tissue, in your energy levels, in your sleep quality, and in how your metabolism responds to food and exercise. So when it declines, the downstream effects touch all of those things. Okay, so I want to touch on how the mechanism of action is different between GLP-1 peptides that we talked about last week and this particular subset of peptides that we're going to talk about today. So if you remember from last week, we talked about how GLP-1 peptides work by overriding your appetite, okay, by mimicking a hormone at a much higher concentration than your body would naturally produce it on its own. So these growth hormone peptides that we're talking about today do something completely different than that. They signal your pituitary gland, which is the master gland in your brain that coordinates hormone release, and they ask it to produce more of your own growth hormone. Now, I kind of think of the pituitary gland as like the conductor of a symphony, right? Who might say, bring it up a little bit, flutes, tone it down a little bit, clarinets, right? So your pituitary does the work. It's saying a little bit more growth hormone, and your growth hormone is going to go up. And the result is a restoration of something that your body was already designed to produce, just at a level it can no longer reach on its own. And the important distinction here is that you're not injecting actual growth hormone into your body. You are helping your body produce more of it on its own. And that's a really significant difference. Think of it this way. There's a big difference between injecting actual testosterone directly into your body or taking something like D-aspartic acid or Tribulus, which are supplements that help support your body's own testosterone production. One is introducing something externally or exogenously, while the other is supporting a process that your body already has the ability to do, helping you to produce more endogenously from the inside. And that's exactly what we're talking about with this particular subset of peptides. Okay. Before we move on, I do want to address one thing because you might be thinking like, wait, Tanya, you said the GLP-1s help you to produce more of something that your body already makes. And now you're saying these particular peptides do the same thing. So what's the difference here? And it's a really fair question. And so I want to make sure that we clear this up before we go any further. The GLP-1s are not simply helping your body to produce a little more of something it already makes. Okay, what they're doing is creating a level and a duration of receptor activation that your body would never naturally produce on its own at any point in your life. Your body's own GLP-1 has a half-life of like 1 to 2 minutes. It spikes briefly after you eat, and then it disappears almost immediately. Like that's how God designed it to work. Now, when we take a GLP-1 peptide, on the other hand, it has a half-life of about 7 days, meaning it's keeping those receptors continuously activated for days at a time. And this is actually why the standard medical dosing on these shots is 1 time per week. That's not your body producing a little bit more of something. That is a level of sustained activation that your physiology was never designed to experience. What we're talking about today is something very genuinely different. These growth hormone peptides they're nudging your pituitary to produce growth hormone in a pattern that is closer to what your own body naturally produced when you were younger. Not some supraphysiological state, not continuous receptor saturation. Okay, it's a restoration towards your own natural baseline in a rhythm that your body actually understands. And that's a really important distinction here. So let's get into some of these growth hormone peptides that I'm speaking to. We're going to start with ipamorelin and CJC-1295, because these two are almost always discussed as being used together, and there's a pretty good reason for it. So ipamorelin is what's called a GHRP. That's a growth hormone releasing peptide. And it works by stimulating specific receptors in your pituitary to trigger a pulse of growth hormone release. And what makes ipamorelin particularly well regarded in the functional medicine world is that it's very selective in how it does this. So it's able to trigger a growth hormone release without significantly increasing cortisol, without increasing prolactin. I mean, this is very important. And without stimulating your appetite the way that some other growth hormone peptides can. And we're going to get into that too. So you get a clean growth hormone pulse without a lot of unwanted hormonal noise on top of it, right? So if we go back to that conductor of the symphony, if the conductor says speed up and everybody speeds up and you go, no, wait, I actually only wanted the flutes to speed up, right? So this particular peptide has the ability to do that. CJC-1295 works through a different receptor pathway. So it mimics something called GHRH, which stands for growth hormone releasing hormone. And this is the signal your hypothalamus normally sends to your pituitary to tell it to produce growth hormone. And because CJC-1295 has a much longer half-life than natural GHRH, it extends and amplifies that signaling window. So when you combine ipamorelin and CJC-1295, you're hitting two separate receptor pathways at the same time. And so the effect is going to be stronger. It's going to be a more sustained growth hormone pulse than either one is going to produce on its own. And both are still working through your own pituitary. So your body is still making the growth hormone. The peptides are just giving it a stronger signal to do so. Both are injectable. Both are typically taken twice daily, one time at rise before eating anything, and then again at bedtime. And both doses are taken on an empty stomach. So the morning dose gives you a clean growth hormone pulse at the start of the day before food and insulin come into the picture. And then that bedtime dose really aligns with your body's natural nocturnal growth hormone release window, okay, which generally happens during deep sleep. And this is where our sleep series from last month comes right back into the conversation, because the quality of your deep sleep really does matter for how well this whole process works. If you're not getting good deep sleep, you really are going to be limiting how much this category can really do for you. Now, there's something I do want to flag about CJC-1295 specifically, because if you start to do your research on this one, and maybe you already have, you're going to notice that it is sold two ways. You're going to see with DAC and without DAC. DAC is DAC, okay? And this is not a minor labeling difference. This really changes how the peptide behaves in your body, and I want you to understand why it's important. So DAC stands for drug affinity complex. And when it's added to CJC-1295, it binds to a protein in your blood called albumin. And what that does is it extends the half-life of the peptide from about 30 minutes all the way up to like 6 to 8 days. So now, instead of injecting it twice daily, you would only need to inject it like once or twice a week. And so on the surface, I think that sounds, fairly convenient, but there's a problem with it. That extended half-life means you're now creating this sustained, continuous elevation of growth hormone rather than that natural pulsatile pattern that we've been talking about. And that really starts to move away from the whole point of what we're trying to do here, which is support restoration of a natural rhythm, not create another form of prolonged receptor saturation. So CJC-1295 without DAC has a half-life of about 30 minutes and produces that clean, pulsatile growth hormone release that mirrors how your body was actually designed to work. So yes, you have to inject it more frequently, but that frequency is part of why it works the way that it should. So if you're exploring this category and somebody recommends CJC-1295, I just really want to make sure that you go for the without DAC. Okay, the convenience of the version with DAC is not worth trading away that pulsatile pattern that makes this whole approach different from what we talked about last week. So let's move on. Let's move on to Sermorelin. So Sermorelin is another GHRH analog. And this one has actually been around the longest of all growth hormone peptides. It was FDA approved for use in children with growth hormone deficiency. And while that original approval is no longer active, it has the longest safety and research record of anything in this category. And it's still widely available through compounding pharmacies. So like CJC 1295, Sermorelin works by stimulating your pituitary to release your own growth hormone. And it produces what tends to feel like a very natural, gentle increase in growth hormone output because it has a shorter half-life. And it creates that pulsatile release that more closely mimics how your body would naturally do it on its own. So for a woman who is interested in this category, but she wants to start with like the most established and the most conservative option, Sermorelin is going to be where I would point the conversation first. So if you're wondering how to think about which of these might be more relevant for you, here's kind of a simple way to frame it. Sermorelin tends to be the choice for women who are focused on long-term aging, sustainable hormone balance, and improving sleep quality over time. Ipamorelin, especially when paired with CJC 1295, tends to be a better fit for women who are focused on performance, on muscle recovery, and more visible body composition changes like fat reduction. Okay, both are working through the same general pathway, but the goals they're best known for supporting are just a little bit different. Now, there is one more peptide in this category that I want to mention, and it's one that I think is especially worth knowing about if you are an apple-shaped woman who carries a significant amount of weight in your midsection specifically. And I'm not talking here about like a little bit of an extra spare tire that you've put on over the last few years. I'm really talking to the woman who's always known that she does put weight on in the midsection. Like we're talking about that visceral fat that surrounds your organs, okay? Tesamorelin is another GHRH analog. So it works through the same general mechanism as CJC 1295 and Sermorelin. So it stimulates your pituitary to produce more of your own growth hormone. But what makes Tesamorelin stand out from the others is that it does actually have an actual FDA approval specifically for reducing visceral fat. And visceral fat, again, is that deep abdominal fat that sits around your organs. And it's the kind of fat that shows up, truly a stubborn midsection weight that like does not respond to diet and exercise. Like you might notice the rest of your body changing, but your apple shape in the middle just will not go away. So Tesamorelin was originally approved for a specific population dealing with excess visceral fat. But the mechanism is directly relevant to women in midlife who carry their weight centrally. And I want to be clear that this is not the same as just losing overall body weight, okay? Tesamorelin is documented evidence specifically for reducing that deep visceral adiposity, which is the type of fat that is actually most associated with metabolic dysfunction, with cardiovascular risk, and hormonal dysfunction. And in fact, a lot of men really, the beer belly, right? Quote unquote beer belly. A lot of men are in favor of this particular peptide. And here's something really practical, I think worth understanding if this particular peptide resonates with you. We talked about women combining the CJC 1295 and ipamorelin together and why that combination works so well, again, because they hit two completely different receptor pathways, which is going to create that synergistic effect. But if you're specifically an apple-shaped woman trying to target visceral fat, the logical adjustment in that case would be to swap out the CJC 1295 and replace it with Tesamorelin, okay, while keeping in the ipamorelin. So it would be Tesamorelin and ipamorelin together. And the reason that works is because the Tesamorelin is also a GHRH analog, so it still hits that same pathway that the CJC 1295 was covering. But now you have Tesamorelin specific visceral fat targeting built into the stack. So you still get that dual pathway synergy, and you get it with a peptide that is documented evidence specifically for reducing the deep abdominal fat. So for the right woman, that Tesamorelin plus ipamorelin combo is really a targeted and intentional protocol, that may be worth considering. Before we finish up our peptide talk for today, I do want to make sure I cover MK677. This is also called ibutamoren. Because I think at first glance, this one can look really attractive when you first hear about it. And the reason for that, in fact, a lot of bodybuilders take this. The reason for it is that it's actually an oral option. Now, first and foremost, while MK677 does usually get grouped in with the peptide world, it's technically not a peptide. It's an oral growth hormone secretagogue, which means it stimulates growth hormone release, but it does this through a completely different pathway than ipamorelin, CJC1295, or Sermorelin, okay? MK677 works through your ghrelin receptors. This is a really important distinction. Ghrelin is your hunger hormone. It is the hormone that tells your brain that you are hungry, and it also tells your pituitary to release growth hormone. And MK677 activates both of those signals at the same time. Now, the practical appeal is very real. It's oral. You don't have to inject yourself, which I think, a lot of people would really favor. It has a long half-life, so you only have to take it once a day. And it does produce, a meaningful increase in growth hormone and in IGF-1. So I completely understand why people are drawn to it. But here's the trade-off, especially if you're a woman in midlife who's specifically working toward fat loss and body composition. Because the MK677 works through the ghrelin pathway, it can significantly increase your appetite. And for a woman who's already navigating the hormonal shifts of perimenopause, of menopause, we've got the food noise, where appetite regulation and blood sugar stability are already more challenging. Adding something that activates your hunger hormone pathway could work directly against your goals. It can also cause water retention and bloating. And some research has flagged increases in fasting glucose with longer term use. So it's not off the table for everyone. And I think there are actually a lot of men, who do find this to be a really good fit. But I'm speaking to women like myself in midlife. And for us specifically, I just want you to go into that conversation with your eyes open and with a real understanding of what the mechanism actually is. Because if someone recommends this to you, part of the appeal they may lead with is that it's oral, and that's true, and that it's convenient. But now you know what the trade-off is, and you can ask the right questions. So I want to spend a minute on something that I think is one of the most important differences between this category and what we talked about last week, because I don't want it to get lost. When you use growth hormone peptides alongside consistent exercise, your body gets better at recovering, better at building lean muscle, and better at using fat as fuel. And over time, your body composition shifts. More muscle, less fat equals better metabolism. And here's what I want you to take away. The muscle you build through exercise while using these peptides, you earned that. Like, that muscle is yours. It does not go away when you stop the peptide, so long as you keep training, right? So long as you keep resistance training. Because the peptide supported the process, but the exercise is what actually built the tissue. And the more lean muscle you have, the more calories your body burns at rest. That's how this supports your metabolism in a very lasting way. Now, compare that to what we talked about last week with the GLP-1s. The moment you stop a GLP-1 peptide, the food noise comes back. The appetite suppression is gone. Your brain is no longer receiving that artificial satiety signal. Without it, the drive to eat returns either to where it was before, or in some cases even stronger. Like, you've just gone a long time without eating very much food. Nothing about the root cause of food noise was addressed. And that's why the weight tends to come back. Remember what we talked about last week with the muscle loss and GLP-1s? When the weight comes back, it comes back mostly as fat, not as lean muscle, right? And we lost muscle while we were on the GLP-1 peptide. So not only are you back to where you started, you're actually starting back with less lean body mass than you had before, which means a lower metabolism than you had before. The deck is stacked against you a little bit more each time that cycle repeats. So that's the difference. Growth hormone peptides help you build something that stays, and GLP-1s suppress something that returns when you stop. And I think that just is a really, really important distinction to understand. So who are these peptides actually for, and what does working with them actually look like? This category tends to be most relevant for women who are already doing the foundational work. And I want to be clear on that. These are women who are eating enough protein, training consistently, sleeping as well as they can, and still finding that recovery is slower than it used to be, that building muscle is harder than it used to be, or that their body composition has shifted in ways that just doesn't feel proportionate to the effort they're putting in. And what I want the biggest takeaway to be today is that these peptides work best along exercise. They are not a shortcut to muscle. They support the building and the recovery process, but you have to give your body something to recover from and something to build, right? If you're not training consistently, you're not going to get the body composition benefits that we've been talking about. You can't just give yourself a shot and think you're going to grow muscle and lose fat. The peptide creates the environment. The exercise creates the result. Now, if this is something that you are genuinely considering, the first thing I want you to know is that for most of the injectable peptides we covered today, ipamorelin, CJC-1295, Tesamorelin, Sermorelin, there's actually a legitimate physician pathway to access these. A functional medicine physician, an integrated medical doctor, a longevity specialist, they can all prescribe these and they can be dispensed through a compounding pharmacy. That compounding pharmacy route is really important because it does mean quality control and sterility standards that research peptide vendors simply do not have to meet. So if you can find a practitioner who's knowledgeable about peptide therapy and they can look at the full picture, right? Your labs, your hormones, your lifestyle, that's always going to be the route that I'm going to point you to first. But I also want to be realistic. I always say I am a realist because I know a lot of people are going to research these and end up ordering from a peptide vendor online. And I'm not going to pretend that doesn't happen. If you do go that route, please make sure that you go through a reputable website. Now, Peptide Sciences is one that I know of that is a more reputable vendor in terms of quality testing and transparency. So if you do use a research peptide vendor, you want to make sure that they have third-party testing documentation available, okay? Because not all vendors are created equal. It's just really important. Anytime something gets really big, it's like all these companies come out making it, and you just really have to do your research. So I want to close with something that's been sitting with me as I've been putting this episode together. Isaiah 40:31 says, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." And I just think about that verse a lot in the context of the women that I work with, because so many of them are struggling because they've been trying for a long time. And their faith is being tested. And they're weary from carrying a physical load that their current season of life is no longer supporting the way it used to. And I find something just really meaningful in that promise. That renewal is available. That strength can return. That weariness that we're carrying, it is seen. It is known by the one who designed us. Whatever season you are in right now, whatever your body is carrying, that promise belongs to you too, sister. If today's episode helped you understand what this category of peptides actually is and how it's different from the GLP-1s that we covered last week, that makes me really happy. And I want you to come back next week for episode 57. I'm really excited about this one. We're sticking with peptides, but we're going to talk about the healing and repair peptides, BPC 157 and TB 500, which together make up what a lot of people are calling the Wolverine stack. You may or may not have heard of it. And we're also going to cover GHK-Cu, which is the copper peptide. And this is the one that I think a lot of women in this audience are going to, probably be excited about. This one touches on collagen production, skin elasticity, hair follicle health, tissue repair, It even has antioxidant and neuroregeneration properties. So, and here's the thing, just like the growth hormone peptides we've been talking about, the copper peptide actually is pretty similar in that it's something that your body produces naturally, and it just declines with age, right? So by the time most of us are in midlife, we have a lot less of it than we used to. So that conversation is one that I'm really looking forward to having with you. And if this series is making you think seriously about the root cause picture of your own body, I would love for you to get on the wait list for my DNA Reset for Fat Loss Academy. I will leave a link in the show notes. Enrollment is not opening again until early 2027, but being on the list gets you information in the meantime and just puts you first in line for other programs that I will be opening before then. So thank you so much for spending time with me today, and I will see you right back here next week, sister. That's it for today on the Nourish to Thrive podcast. If you found value here, I'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, or send it to someone who's walking a similar path. Keep showing up, keep asking questions, and know that healing is possible, especially when you trust the one who designed your body to heal. Until next time, stay rooted in truth and nourished in grace.